Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. And on this special edition of On Texas Football, CJ Vogel and myself, we're going to be talking about the Longhorns crisis mode. Is kind of what we've nicknamed it. When the Longhorns get down double digits, 2 touchdowns is actually kind of the point that I've actually looked at. When they're down 2 touchdowns in any game versus Power 4 opponents is what we've seen. Something happens. Something is activated within this Texas offense. And CJ and I went rabbit holing and did some deep dive breakdown about it. So we'll share that with you guys here on this edition of On Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, pleased to be joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn, the young prodigy CJ Vogel. And this edition of Texas Football, On Texas Football, brought to you by our good friends at Von Lane. Von Lane, folks, great for traveling all across the great state of Texas or just in the general region. Our friends at Von Lane are expanding their base every day to help you get to anywhere you need to get to in the most luxurious fashion. This fall, you've got places to be, Texas football games, you got NFL games in Houston and in Dallas, you got all types of festivals and concerts. Why waste hours at the airport or stuck behind the wheel? With Von Lane, you just walk into a hotel terminal, you check in within minutes, and you're on board. No TSA, no hassle. Settle into one of just 22 oversized first-class seats. Stretch out, recline, and enjoy complimentary Wi-Fi snacks and drinks. If you want a beer or a cocktail, they've got you covered. Travel is open now through December, so you can book for game days, for concerts, or even for the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas as well. Visit vonlane.com and use the code OTF25 to save $20 on your first ride with Von Lane. That's Von Lane, your private jet on wheels. All right. Thank you very much to our friends at Von Lane. All right, CJ, we'll just open up the conversation because I know you've had some really interesting data about the Longhorns in what we call crisis mode when they've been down 2 touchdowns in games. And the sample size that I looked at was that Ohio State game, obviously. You saw the Florida game, the end of that game, and you have, of course, the Mississippi State game, one of the most epic historic comebacks in Texas football history. What did you find? Because I'll share with my info as well, but what did you find? Because you had a nice story over there at ontexasfootball.com about this specific topic.
I found that Texas has an offense that works, right? That can move the ball and score some points, Rod. It doesn't feel like that's been a solution this year. You know, offensively, there's been plenty of ups and downs, but for whatever reason, when Texas gets in that crisis mode, as you've coined it, they score points and they move the football better than they have at any other point, right? They kind of abandon the 12 personnel until they get to the red zone. They go quick and they throw the football. And I know doing that 40 or 50 times a game may not be the ultimate, recipe for success if you're for, the Texas offense, especially with some of the pass protection issues that they've had. But look, it clears out a lot of the front seven. We've seen it from Kentucky. We saw it against Oklahoma in the second half. Shoot, Florida was doing it as well. And hey, until Texas was in the fourth quarter against Mississippi State, all 4 of these teams in the SEC were doing the exact same thing, Rod, and that's bringing 7 guys into a box, cheating down their safeties and saying, hey, we know you don't have time to sit back in the pocket and throw because in 12 personnel, we don't respect the tight ends enough to be a threat and pass in the passing game to begin with. So they took away everything. And hey, that's what's been really interesting is when Texas gets into this crisis mode and things spread out, they put 3 receivers on the field, good things happen, and the numbers clearly back that up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm with you that they definitely abandoned 12 personnel because Sark, 11 personnel has always been his baby. That's more than half of the time he's going to use 11 personnel. But when he's got a third down and usually when they're in a 2-minute mode, Sark is strictly with 11 personnel. And that's kind of the mindset they have here. They kind of have a 2-minute mindset. They got to score really quickly. So he does abandon 12 personnel and they abandoned the run game because you're down 2 touchdowns. You're trying to get back in the game. So I think there's almost this liberating feeling for Sark where he doesn't have to worry about the burden of balance.
Yeah.
Like they don't worry about balance. Who cares about balance? And your run game, which against Power 4 opponents has averaged, but you had 2.3 yards per rush versus Mississippi State, 1.7 yards per rush versus Kentucky, 3.9 yards per rush versus Oklahoma, 2 yards per rush versus Florida, 4.5 yards per rush versus Ohio State. It has not been a strength for you. So you don't even have to worry about the running game dragging you down. Your best running game becomes Arch in the scramble drill. And Arch is excellent in the scramble drill. I mean, Texas averaging 10 yards per play out of the scramble drill with Arch. So I think because the scramble drill is activated and weaponized even more, like you said, you abandon 12 personnel, you abandon the run game, which has kind of dragged the offense down a little bit, and also straight drop backs. And I've talked about this. You go look at his Pro Football Focus passing grade and his offensive grade for Pro Football Focus on straight drop back situations. He's top 15, top 16 in the country. And he's better in those situations because they're just dropping straight back. They eliminate RPOs and eliminate the play action pass a lot of the times. So I think there is some sound rationale as to why it's working. The question is, can he bottle it and replicate it? Because the numbers that we have about how good the Texas offense is in these situations, they are mind-blowing, CJ. Like I couldn't believe it when I was actually doing the research of how good the Texas offense is in this crisis mode. And I got about 3.5 quarters of a sample size. All right. So that's almost an entire game. But it is, I got to tell you, basically Texas offense becomes the most explosive, the most efficient, arguably, offense in the country in these moments.
And that's completely the opposite of what we've come to know it as in just about every other situation. And I did it a little differently than you. You know, you went down when Texas was down multiple scores and needing to put points up on the board quickly. I looked at it from a perspective of they've scored 11 touchdowns against Power 5 teams, right? It's about 2 a game. 5 of those actually came against Mississippi State. And I just wanted to sit there and go through what worked. You know, how were they able to put points up on the board in all of these different situations? And there were a few commonalities across the board. One, well, and this is more an interesting nugget here. Texas is 3-1, Rod, in conference play so far. They've not scored a touchdown this year when leading a football game. That's one of the more mind-blowing stats that I've come across while researching this. Wow. 4 of the 11 came when they were tied, and obviously 7 of those 11 touchdowns came when they were trailing. But more than just about anything, there were some really key facts and trends of these 11 touchdowns, and I'll read them here for you. Only 2 of them have lasted longer than 3 minutes of time of possession.
Wow.
So 9 of them have been 3 minutes or less. Only 4 of them have needed to travel 70 yards or more. So they haven't necessarily needed to go the length of the field. Obviously, some complementary football aspects in there, but also shows the inability at times in which Texas has needed to travel 70 or 80 or more yards to get into the end zone. Only 2 of the 11 drives, Rod, that they've scored a touchdown on have seen 3 rush attempts or more. Wow. And again, there's one key outlier in all of this. When you go back and look at these scoring drives on paper, it's that 14-play, 75-yard drive that took 7 minutes off the clock against Oklahoma. That's the one outlier, and still that's the one game that we look back on, and that one drive specifically in the third quarter where we just kind of say, man, like, how did they do that? You know, how did they find that success and do that the entire length of the field?
Yeah.
It's been pretty remarkable. And again, going back to that 11 drives that found the end zone, they've had 24 rush attempts from running backs. Only 1 has been longer than 10 yards. That actually came against Mississippi State. It was a 10-yard run on the dot by CJ Baxter. So, look, it kind of goes back to what we were saying. It hits all 3 points on the head. You go fast, 9 of the 11 under 3 minutes. You throw the football. Again, 9 of the 11 saw less than 3 rush attempts. And, hey, you just sit there and rely on your 11 personnel because you're wide receivers. And one more nugget there for you. Mm-hmm. They sit there and have 11 and 12 personnel in all of these scoring drives, right? 37 snaps and 11 personnel for 481 yards. That's 13 yards per play. 12 personnel in these 11 scoring drives, 28 snaps, 117 yards. That's 4.17 yards per play. You tell me where's the explosivity in this.
It's crazy because they're so deep at tight end too. Like, I think they're deep at tight end, but man, the product on the field does not necessarily reflect the talent that I think they have at tight end. So I'm not sure what is it because they just can't block really well. Is it because they're a poor blocking group as a tight end that limits the Texas offense when they're? Is it? I don't know. Is it rotating too many tight ends and they haven't really found the 2 or 3 that they believe give them the best opportunity to generate explosive plays? Like, I actually have no idea why they're so bad at tight end, because Sark wants them to be good because he actually played a lot of 12 personnel earlier in the year, and he's playing more tight ends than he ever played before, and yet they're probably less effective than we've ever seen his 12 personnel use.
Now, 12 personnel, to your point, has been what they've relied on when they get into the red area, and it's been beneficial for the Longhorns, right? I think that's one of the things where you look at across the season, 17 touchdowns and 12 personnel versus 8 and 11. You know, they sit there and want to pound the ball into the end zone. A lot of that has been Arch's legs, of course, but it's interesting because you look at what Levy was able to do when you go fast, when you space the field, and when you beat zone or man coverages based off of a mismatch. It's easy, right? You have a lot of room to run in Texas. Utilize that to an extent late in the game. Man coverage, Texas hit, smash concepts or quick out routes pretty often to DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo to move the ball down the field against Mississippi State. That's just trusting your one-on-one ability. And that hasn't necessarily been what we've seen in terms of getting the ball in space, using the all gas, no brakes mantra, but from Sarkisian. So it's been really a rocky road. And hey, let's not all put this on Sark because, hey, you didn't have DeAndre Moore for 3 games, and Emmett Mosley took about 5 or 6 to really get into a rhythm here. But now that you're healthy and you have that 4-man rotation at wide receiver, it feels like a no-brainer.
It does. See, that's a good point. And I don't think we've talked about that enough, the fact that DeAndre Moore was dealing with some injuries early on. You didn't have Emmett Mosley, and Emmett Mosley is an instant impact player. Like, since he has played, he has made an instant impact. So you are 4 deep, and I guess maybe 4.5 if you like a young Dalen McCutcheon throwing out there. Even Sark mentioned him in the post game, but you should be playing more 11. At this point in the season, 11 works best for you. And, situationally, 12 personnel works best for you when you get in the red zone. But I think Sark needs to overemphasize now the 11 personnel based on those numbers. Great stuff. All right, so I attacked it from a different way when I went down the rabbit hole looking at Texas in crisis mode. And I'm glad we got 2 different breakdowns here. So I went and looked at essentially how efficient, explosive, and effective the offense became in those 3.5 quarters. Now, I only looked at Power 4 teams. We're done looking at the Rudy Poots of San Jose State. We're done with that, right? That's a terrible sample size, distorts everything. So we're only looking at Power 4 opponents. So you played 5 Power 4 opponents, and that gives you 20 quarters of football. 20.5, you include the overtimes. You've had a couple of overtimes there. So out of those 20.5 quarters of football, Texas has 35 explosive plays, 20-plus yard plays on the season. 20 versus Power 4 teams. All right. And if you go look at the 20 they've had with Power 4 teams, 10 of those came in the 3.5 quarters of crisis mode. So 50% of your explosive plays you've had versus Power 4 teams have come in 3.5 quarters of crisis mode.
Wow.
Yeah. I would look at the explosive play rate of Texas in these games outside of crisis mode. Your explosive play rate, 4.1%. versus Power 4 teams outside of crisis mode. In crisis mode, it's over 12%. That would make you the most explosive offense in the country based on explosive play rate. Oregon is at 11.6% explosive play rate, and they have 61 20-plus yard plays on the season. That is the most in college football. So you would be the most explosive offense in the country if you could bottle what you do in crisis mode. All the yards you've got versus the Power 4 opponents, 54% of them came in 3.5 quarters. 54% of your total yards versus your Power 4 opponents have come in those 3.5 quarters.
Wow.
Of crisis mode. It's crazy. 11 touchdowns. You talked about it. They scored versus Power 4 opponents. 6 have come in 3.5 quarters of that crisis mode that we were talking about. Your 45 points will put you at 3.2 points per drive. That would be a top 15, top 20 number. Texas versus Power 4 teams, you have a 38% third down conversion rate, but in crisis mode, you are at 60%. Indiana leads college football at 58% third down conversion rate. But when you're in crisis mode, you're one of the most effective, if not the most effective third down conversion team in the country. And I've looked at yards per play. Texas averaging right now about 5.6 yards per play as a team versus Power 4 teams. You're about 5 yards per play. But in crisis mode, that number jumps to 7.5 yards per play. USC leads the country at 7.8. So you would be in the top 3 yards per play in the country as well if you could bottle and replicate what you do in crisis mode.
And again, what we've talked about in crisis mode is space, throwing the football and going quickly because, well, you need to. And you could throw in some runs. I'm not saying to abandon the run, but for me, I just haven't seen enough success running the football in 12 personnel because of a number of factors, right? Your guards aren't great. Your interior has been banged up. Your tight ends necessarily haven't been what you thought, or at least what you've seen over the last few years. And I have 2 other points I wanted to get to, Rod, and one of them builds exactly into what you were saying. You know, Texas has 1 touchdown against a Power 5 team this year in the first quarter. Just 1. They've played 5 quarters against Power 5 teams. 1 touchdown. And it was after a 60-yard catch and run in which Texas's first play of the game was in 11 personnel, a swing screen to the side of the field where there was space, and Ryan Wingo goes 60 yards to the 3-yard line. You punch it in right away. That's your only touchdown in the first quarter against Power 5 teams this year. Additionally, and this is a bit of a nitpicky stat here, Rod, but it plays into bottling up exactly what you're talking about in that fourth quarter, that idea that you got to score and you got to score quickly. Arch Manning ranks 100th out of 100 qualifying quarterbacks, according to CFBstats.com, in number of pass plays over 25 yards. He is dead last. He has 2 this year against Power 5 teams. On the flip side, you get to the fourth quarter, he has 7. That ranks 4th out of 100. So you see where the difference is. When Texas feels like their backs are against the wall, well, all of a sudden, they start to move the football. And I sit here wondering, Rod, as we've seen this Texas team evolve, this program evolve, Sarkisian's play call evolve, when you had an Xavier Worthy and you had an Adonai Mitchell and you had a Jordan Whittington, you had some big-time wide receivers, right? You could then throw out Jatavian Sanders, and that's a great trio, or, you know, a group of 4 for your 11 personnel. A year ago, obviously, you had DeAndre Moore, Ryan Wingo. They were younger, but Isaiah Bond, you know, Matthew Golden, Gunnar Helm. That's a great group to run 11 personnel. Do you think Sark just doesn't trust what he has right now? Or is he finally coming around to saying, hey, I thought I could mask some of the deficiencies at wide receiver in 12 personnel. It's clearly not worked. Is there a chance that we just see Sark revert back to what the offense was when they were one of the most explosive offenses in the country over the last few years?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think at this point, because of the addition of Emmett Mosley, honestly, and the health of the wide receivers and the display they put on versus Mississippi State, I think you could get Sark opening up the offense and deciding at this point, this is what works. And I think Sark wants to throw the football anyway. We know Sark, when he's deep in his bag and at his most creative, Sark is throwing the football. And I think he's actually got a pass first mentality, especially in early downs. So I think Sark may lean into this, considering the opponents he's got coming up. You got teams that can just score. I mean, Vanderbilt, they play a kind of controlled offense, but if you're talking about Arkansas, you're talking about A&M, you're talking about some offenses who can really light it up. And even Georgia's offense is getting better. So I think if you end up in another kind of shootout, potentially shootout, I think Sark understands that, I'd like to play with a lead at times. That'd be great. Instead of getting into crisis mode all the time, how about I can play with a lead? And maybe that's the inspiration to have him bottle this, whatever it is, in crisis mode, and try to use it early. And try to, like you said, you can't do it the whole game. We get it. 4 quarters of it. It's unrealistic. That's not practical. But could you, in the first quarter and in the first half, try some way to all those things that we listed that are now kind of qualities of this crisis mode? Could you apply those earlier in the game and try to somewhat recreate that? Like I said, it will be tough to do because I think a lot of it is psychology. Where Sark feels somewhat liberated because, hey, nobody cares what I call right now. I just got to put points on the board. Nobody's going to critique my play calling. Nobody's going to talk. Nope. And I think a lot of it's for Arch too. Arch is liberating for him because I think for Arch, he also has less pressure on him. It's more of a backyard feel. And everybody, you just dropping back and whoever's open, you go give them the football. And I think there's less rigidity to the structure of the offense. It's almost like, nah, it's very relaxed. Just go out there and make a damn play. We don't care who makes it and how you make it.
That's where the recess aspect comes in.
Yes, yeah. Like I said, so I don't know. How can you recreate that early on, when the game is very different in the first quarter? So I'm with you, man. It's mind-blowing to throw it out there. Like I said, the number I wanted to make sure I get right. I don't know if I want to make sure everybody understood me. I was comparing all the Power 4 teams. The 54% of their yards are from the 3 games where they were in crisis mode. We'll throw it out there. 54% of their yards in those 3 games came when they were in crisis mode. Just wanted to make sure I got that stat right. But the point is that what CJ and I are trying to convey is that Texas does have it in them to be an elite, explosive, efficient offense. Like we're looking at it. It doesn't look, I think, how Sark envisioned it. And I don't think any of us really can figure out how they're going to recreate and replicate it. But the good news is they're capable of it. They've done it on the road at Ohio State. They've done it on the road at Florida and Mississippi State. All Power 4 opponents of different, obviously, the caliber opponents. But Texas can do that. Like I said, I wonder if Sark will be able to find the magic recipe, the formula for it.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because, for whatever reason, Rod, we haven't seen it unless Texas is trailing or in a desperate mode to get the ball across midfield into an end of half situation. So can there be a way that Sarkisian bottles it up, as your point is, and uses it at the beginning of games? And I think the ultimate solution here is less 12 personnel and allow your speedsters. And that's the thing. It doesn't feel like Texas has speed this year at wide receiver because, we haven't seen opportunities for these guys to get the ball and go. I think a large part of that is because of the 12 personnel or condensing, and it's just been difficult. Well, one thing that you can do is space the field a little bit, put stress on the defense, and lighten the box so that you can't get blitzed from everywhere from the second level or even beyond. And that's one way that you can alleviate some of the pressure because, hey, that's second half, that fourth quarter against Mississippi State, you weren't under pressure all that much.
Yeah.
I think a large part of that is because, you space the field and you let Arch play in that freedom recess mode.
Yeah. Yeah. And the defense has to respect that speed once you start making big plays back there. All right. Good stuff, CJ. That was awesome. Appreciate you and the breakdown. Appreciate you going rabbit holing for the people out there. Thanks to our friends at Von Lane, vonlane.com. Use that code OTF25. You'll save $20 off your first ride with Von Lane. And thanks to each and every one of you for watching and for listening. For CJ, I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.